Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Valentin's YouTube video for Lord of the Flies, your culminating test. Today we're going to go over the plot diagram, which is important for you to know, some important characters, and then talk about introductions and body paragraphs, all of which will be exhibited on the test in some form. So let's begin. First things first is the plot diagram. You know the plot diagram. We do it pretty much every single day in class, but now's the time to solidify that knowledge. So let's take a look. Remember, a plot diagram is composed of 6 main parts. I teach the plot diagram in 6 parts. I think a story is composed of 6 things. Other teachers might teach it differently. However, for this class, we're concerned about the way that I'm teaching it so you can pass the test. So, first things first, alright, is the exposition. Remember, the exposition is where you meet the characters, you find out some general information about the setting, who these characters are, where they came from. And the exposition continues until you get to this dotted line. This dotted line indicates a shift in the story, sometimes referred to as the narrative hook. This we will refer to as the inciting incident. And so that's this dotted line, again, going up. We then have this line going up, oftentimes referred to as the rising action. But remember, the important part is that you're using the vocabulary of the classroom. And we have deemed this the, quote, complication. We then have the next part of the story, which we know as the climax. We then have this line going down, often referred to as the falling action, but we refer to it as the, quote, denouement, or denouement. Now, remember, all right, you do need to know how to spell these things. You're writing them out. Incorrect spellings will result in a deduction of a point. So do be sure, because this is the trickiest word, you know how to spell denouement or denouement. All right, so it's D-E-N-O-U, and then that E often goes missing. So E-M-E-N-T. And then at the end we have the conclusion, which concludes the events. All right, but we don't want to call it the conclusion, so we are going to call it, of course, the resolution. Perfect. So now we have these parts of the story. So that's going to be the first part of your exam. The second part of your exam is you're going to be given an event. And in the event of the story, once it's listed, you need to tell me where it goes. So it may look something like this. So let me just show you an example. And it'll say something like, Simon is killed. It's then your job, all right, to remember, where did this come from? Did it come from the exposition, the inciting incident, complication, climax, denouement, resolution? And so you're going to be writing in this box. And so, of course, you would write for Simon is killed. That happens in the climax. It's really not too difficult if you know where things go. But there's a good chance that because the story's been so long, and we have been doing it for now some 8 weeks, you may have forgotten where some of the things go. So let's do a little refresher and put some things down, and I'll also test your skills on where we think things go. So let's try practice where I give you an event and you tell me where it goes. So let's start with something easy. Let me just change the color of the font. And here we go. Ralph is chief. Or Ralph becomes chief, we'll say. When does that happen? And of course, as we know, that happens in the exposition. All right. Let's try another. Let's say the boys kill the sow. When does that happen? And as we know, that happens in the climax. All right. Another. Let's say Piggy is killed. When does that happen? And as we know, that happens in the denouement. Another. The conch breaks. And again, that happens in the denouement. You might see something along the lines of Sam and Eric are tied up. And as we know, that happens in the, again, denouement. Or there might be something about the Mulberry Mark kid who goes missing. And we know that happens in the inciting incident. You might see something about the big storm occurs. And the big storm happens during the climax. You might see the airplane crashes. And obviously the airplane crashed in the exposition. But you might also see the fighter plane crashes. In which case you know that happens in the complication. There might be something about Percival Wemyss Madison. And Percival's the boy who always cries. And it might say something like Percival first gets picked on. And that also happens in the complication. You might see something about Simon being savagely murdered. And that happens in the climax. Of course, if you know the end of the story, right, the boys are rescued, which obviously happens in the resolution. Another big thing that happens is Ralph comes face to face with the Lord of the Flies. And that is the resolution. You might see some real basics. Things like, we meet Ralph. And that happens in the exposition. And that would go for any of the characters. It might even say, you know, meet Jack in the choir. And of course, again, exposition. Good enough. You might see something about Ralph and his crew walking to Castle Rock to confront Jack. And that happens in the denouement. Anything involving Simon talking to the pig? Talking to the Lord of the Flies? We know that is climax. Cool. All right. You have a more complete version of this. All right. So you should study. But these are some things that you should definitely focus on for the story. For your test, obviously. And then you're going to have a section about the characters in the story. And there's a good number of characters, just to mention some that you may have forgotten or were maybe not necessarily emphasized. Characters like Bill or Henry. There's characters we obviously know like Jack. And then other characters that are questionably characters like Lord of the Flies. There's people like the naval officer, Percival, and of course Piggy. There's Roger, Robert, and of course Sam and Eric. And you might just get one, you might just get Sam, or you might just get Eric. You want to know, of course, Wilfred. I missed Ralph. We want to make sure we have him listed because he's a pretty big deal. And I think that's the big lot. Some of the characters you might not remember. In terms of Bill, alright, Bill is, alright, the character Ralph sees who doesn't act like himself. They say, Bill was not Bill, alright, it was a different Bill. Okay, so it was one of those like weird moments. Henry, we've seen a lot about Henry in terms of being teased and stuff like that, but one of the most important things that maybe was de-emphasized by me, but should be emphasized, alright, is the fact that he's a relative of the kid who goes missing. New things about Jack is he's the new chief, he runs Castle Rock. Should capitalize Castle Rock, it's a proper name. Lord of the Flies, I don't think too much needs to be said as Lord of the Flies, alright? But do remember that it is an illusion, alright? And that it's an allusion to the Bible, and that it's the devil. Obviously, the naval officer is the person who rescues the boys. Percival, the boy who's always crying. Piggy, poor Piggy, cries a lot. Not a lot, I guess. That's kind of off base. Whines a lot, but has newfound power, at least in the second part of the story. And we certainly want to note, like, on the way to Castle Rock, he's the person, he holds the conch. Ralph, we know, currently was being hunted. Roger and Robert kind of de-emphasized. but Roger is the person who, I guess, very technically kills Piggy. So I would note that. I wouldn't worry too much about Robert. Remember, Sam and Eric get captured, and they also give food to Ralph. Obviously, if we list that for Sam and Eric, we don't have to do that. And poor Wilfred, he's the boy who gets tortured for no reason. So, those are characters that you should know. There may be more, but these are the general characters, and I tried to make sure we went over some of the characters you might have forgotten. Finally, alright, you may be tasked with writing an introduction. Not you may. You will be tasked with writing an introduction. Probably about one of the major themes that we've talked about in the story so far. Remember, for an introduction, you need your tag, which is your title, your author, and your genre. Obviously, the title of the book is Lord of the Flies. You know that. All you need to say, the author. Do remember the author. If you don't remember it, that will cause problems. William Golding. And the genre, all you have to say is that it's fiction or that it's a novel. Something of that nature. Some people get a little more descriptive, that it's dystopian. That's not necessary. Remember to build interest. Remember to try to hit 6 to 8 sentences. And address the topic specifically. If your topic is about isolation, then make sure you define isolation. If it's about heroic traits, be sure to explore that topic. If it's about codes of conduct, address that as well. All right, whatever it is, you need to make sure it's fully addressed. And be sure to have a 3-point thesis. And remember, that's 3 things that you're going to talk about. So if we're talking about how Simon is isolated, there should be 3 main ideas. All right, Simon is isolated because he goes off on his own. Goes off on his own. So that's 1. Then you would need to list 2 more. Simon is isolated because he prefers solitude. And he's just generally peculiar. All right, now you have 3 main points for your introduction. The introduction, we've done that a lot. What may pose more difficulty is the body paragraph. Whoa, that is not what I meant to do. Boop. There we go. So, for a body paragraph, remember, you need to start with a topic sentence. Where the thesis comes at the end of the first paragraph, the body paragraph, the topic sentence, comes at the beginning. So what you're going to do for a topic sentence is you're going to explain one of these main ideas. So he goes off on his own, he prefers solitude, or he is peculiar. You're going to choose one of those, all right, and that's going to become your topic sentence and explain it a little more in depth. Again, all right, you should be sure to the word I'm looking for? Be sure to provide support. I'll find a way for you to provide support. I'll have quotes up on the board or something akin to that. And remember, with your quotes, you need to make sure you introduce them and explain them. Again, you are aiming for 6 to 8 sentences, so do keep that in mind. And that's pretty much it. If you have questions, hopefully you came to extra help and this is just reinforcement, but you probably still have time to ask these questions, so do present them and ask them and come to me with any further information or worries or wonders. And I think that's pretty much it. If you find this helpful, just make sure you hit the little like button or whatever it is at the bottom, because I like to see those. And that's pretty much it. Good luck and study. And watch it again if you have time.